So folks, we all miss something about the past. And more specifically, we probably miss certain things about our pre-pandemic world. Many of us miss going on coffee dates with friends or being able to hop on an airplane and go travel whenever we want. On my list of things I miss, after seeing my family, of course, and things like that, the thing I miss most is going to the movies. My husband, Bobby, and I, when we first met back in 2012, bonded over our love of movies. I love all genres of film, but particularly gravitate toward horror and science fiction. I love horror movies because they force us to confront the realities of evil in our world, and most of them are amazing commentaries on religion. And friends, I love science fiction because it forces us to ask questions like, what's out there? What makes a human human? Or what are the ethical implications of human advancements? So in December of 2016, the movie Passengers was released in theaters, and Bobby and I saw it within a week of opening night. The main characters, Jim and Aurora, played by Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, are passengers on an intergalactic spaceship called the Avalon. The Avalon, a sleeper ship transporting 5,000 colonists and 258 crew members in hibernation pods, is traveling from Earth to the planet Homestead 2, a journey lasting 120 years. Everyone on board will sleep for that long journey, wake up in a new world, and not have aged a day. But 30 years into the journey, an asteroid collision damages the ship, resulting in a malfunction that awakens one passenger, mechanical engineer Jim Preston, 90 years too early. Once he discovers that he has woken up too soon, the panic sets in. As he tries and tries to figure out a solution like going back to sleep or contacting Earth for help, he suddenly realizes that he will die before the journey is completed. At first, there is some freedom in his situation. With no one around, he can do anything he wants with no repercussions. But as the days and weeks wear on, he becomes depressed with his isolation, and at one point feels there is really no reason to even go on. He contemplates just ending his life now. But we see as the movie goes on, however, and I won't give away any spoilers because I really hope you will go watch this movie, as Aurora awakens too, the couple starts finding ways to mark the days. Even though their original goal when boarding the ship was to sleep for 120 years, wake up in the future on a new planet, to start a new civilization, they actually discover ways in which they can live each day now on this new detour in loving and meaningful ways. In looking back on their journey at the end, Aurora, a journalist, writes these words: "You can't get so hung up on where you'd rather be that you forget to make the most of where you are. Yes, we got lost along the way, but we found each other, and we made a life a beautiful life together. Passengers is a story of ethics and time travel, yes, but it's also a story of love and finding what's important about life. Finding new ways in which to mark time when control has is central to the plot line of this movie and to life itself. Friends, our collective plot line begins in the book of Genesis. It's a story that we have heard so many times. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. The Hebrew word for formless is tahu. It means to lack worth or purpose. And what is God's response to this non-order? God creates. And the Hebrew word for create is bara. So when we think of the word create, we normally think of making something. We create a piece of art, a building, or we create a committee, a curriculum, a piece of music. Create can refer to a lot of things. So to understand its meaning, we must look at the way the writer is using it here in Genesis. Bara is used about 50 times in the Old Testament, and in most cases, the direct object of this verb has to do with creating something for a specific role or function. God doesn't just create something, God creates it for a specific purpose. In the creation of the first day, God gives us an incredible gift of structure. Time becomes a way for us to organize and make sense of our lives. Even before humans were created, our world was set up in a way for us to mark time and moments. Time helps ground us, so I do not believe I am alone in a very serious problem I've been having over the past year or so. How many of you have literally forgotten what day it is? Or you're sitting in a Zoom meeting and suddenly think, oh my gosh, what time is it? I have to go, yada, yada, yada. Or you start a story with, yeah, the other day I was, to suddenly realize that thing happened almost a year ago. There is a name for this, friends. It's called temporal dislocation, being lost in time. Many of us have struggled with making sense of time during this pandemic. And we've been dealing with this in a varying degree throughout this past year. Whether we've been completely isolated and bored, or completely overwhelmed and busy with meetings and homeschooling, it turns out that scientifically our sense of time is connected to structure and with making memories. People with limited social circles or who are confined to limited geographies have fewer external interactions and make fewer memories. And memories enable us to mark time. Now, the main issue over the past year for many of us has been sameness. The same computer screen, the same people, the same rooms, all the sameness of the pandemic has actually caused the parts of our brains that make memories to go flaccid and has flattened our sense of time. Memories are one of the ways that we judge how much time has passed. For example, when you go on vacation for a week to a new place, the time goes fast while you're away because everything's new. But when you get home, you look back and you've made so many memories that it often feels as if you've been away for far longer than a week. The opposite can happen in lockdown. We are having a hard time judging time. So throughout the past year, in an attempt to find comfort and direction, I've been reading my Bible a lot more than usual. Sometimes when the whole world feels like it's falling apart, reading something that has been around for thousands of years actually calms me down. One of the scriptures I have gravitated toward in particular over these past 13 months or so is 2 Peter chapter 3, and this verse specifically. Do not ignore this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like 1 day. It's a reminder that God gave us time as a gift, and that while sometimes temporal dislocation may happen for us humans, God sees it all and is holding us through it all. Peter is trying to help the early Christians understand that God's timeline isn't the same as our timeline, for better or for worse. Peter's readers were concerned about the second coming of Christ taking way too long for their liking. And we today find ourselves getting super impatient about things as well. It's a reminder that time, like the gift of purpose and function that God gave us in the beginning of creation, can get a little warped sometimes. It's not a new thing, folks. I find some comfort in knowing that people have dealt with this for a long time. 3 years ago, after giving birth to my first child and still trying to complete all my work for my master's degree, I was exhausted. One Sunday at church, I was explaining/complaining to an older woman in my congregation about how terrible these nights were with a newborn. She smiled at me and teared up a little, saying, "Oh, my dear, the nights are long, but the years are so short. The nights are long, but the years are so short." I have never forgotten that wise phrase uttered by a mom and grandmother who understood how the minutes can seem to barely move, and yet there are days when we take a step back and have no idea how a lifetime has passed. And here's the thing, though. God gets it. God ordered and organized the world so that we had a system to lean on. And if we want to get back to the basics, I think we could all follow God's example. By ordering the world and creating meaning out of the void, God invited us into the opportunity of intentionally marking time. What if we as individuals and communities came back to the beginning and recognized the importance of marking time each day. Ritualizing things is central to our faith, not because what we do then becomes habit, but rather because ritual helps ground us in time. As more and more of us begin to receive vaccines and people begin to regather for celebrations, we must also remember that the effects of the pandemic are not just going to magically go away. In order for us to make meaning out of the last year and whatever timeline lays ahead of us, I wonder if one of the things we need to resurrect in our lives is temporal relocation. It could be as simple as setting an alarm in your phone that goes off at the same time every day so that we can be more aware of the order of our world. It could be taking some time with your family or friends or just by yourself to really look back at the last year, not just as the pandemic, but look for the guideposts and moments and memories and promise yourself that you will try and remember them. Not just discount this whole last year as a waste or something too difficult to think about. I invite you to remember the gift of time that God gave us, while also remembering that temporal dislocation is natural in times like this. It is our job to relocate ourselves in the timeline and find ways to honor God by marking the days in intentional ways. By doing this individually and communally, we move closer to the divine. Have a little grace with yourself these days. But just in case you forgot, today is Sunday, April 11th, 2021. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and gave us the gift of time so that we could find meaning and purpose and grounding. You are allowed to feel overwhelmed by our world's case of temporal dislocation, but I also pray you remember that God already gave us the tools to mark time, and that God is holding us through it all. Amen.